welcome to our first of 10 webinars in our 2025 Women in Leadership Executive Speaker Series, with this one being the first, titled Critical Components That Propel Women's Careers. I'm Dr. Susan Madsen, founding director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, and also I'm the Karen Haight Huntsman Endowed Professor of Leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University, and I'm the host and will be the panel moderator today. And this event furthers the mission of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. And we serve Utah and its residents by first, producing relevant, trustworthy, and applicable research. Second, creating and gathering valuable resources. And third, convening trainings and events that inform, inspire, and ignite growth and change for all Utahns. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, the John M. Huntsman School of Business and Utah State University Extension. So first, I want to start by introducing our panelists. And I'm going to start today with Michelle Loveday. And after I introduce her, I'm going to actually give her the first question, and then I'll introduce Sid as well. So Michelle Loveday has been an educator for 23 years, leaving her home state of Ohio. She taught in North Carolina until relocating to Utah in 2005. 20 years, Michelle, 20 years. She was a first and second grade teacher, a literacy coach, principal, and associate director of educational equity. And she is currently the director of the Language and Culture Services Department for Jordan School District. She also is the director and founder of Rise Academy and a co-founder of Utah Rooting Out Racism. Michelle has worked with teachers to inspire, motivate, and encourage. She shares information on ways parents can work with schools, advocate for their children, and how they can assist in creating a rich, diverse literacy environment at home and in school. And she's served on so many state boards and other kinds of boards in the community, and is so passionate about schools being student-focused and a place where all students feel they are welcome and have adults that believe in them and who believe both in them and they believe in them as well. So Michelle, the first question, welcome, first of all, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored that you asked for me to be on this panel. Thank you.
Wow, I love it. Both of you are in education, so that's where I started. And so I love that. You have such a diverse background as well, but I would love to have you get started and just talk about your background. I've read that bio, but give us some background on your educational background, but also your career path. I mean, how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, so education, definitely, I love to quote Nelson Mandela, and it's at the top of my door. Education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. And so I always knew that I wanted to change, make change, and be change within the world. I never imagined that my career path would be where it is today. I thought I was going to always be that first and second grade teacher that you mentioned, which is why I still make sure that that's in my bio, because I still am a first grade teacher and a second grade teacher at all times at heart, and that path. So I think for
Did
me,
you get into that right after college?
I
Is that
did.
what you
And the
jumped in?
thing is, I knew when I was little, I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian, right?
Oh,
In fourth grade, yes. I was going to be a veterinarian, and I was going to be like FloJo, Florence Griffith Joyner, the track runner. And then I was also going to just do those things. And then I saw the nastiness with the veterinarian position and thought, nope, just kidding. But then later on, being around educators, my father is a retired administrator and athletic director from our school system. He was an educator. My good friends' parents were educators. And so I was very fortunate to grow up in an environment outside of Greater Cleveland, where I had people that looked like me in education. And so
mm,
I was able and afforded to see how they interacted with us and myself. And I thought, oh, I really want to do that. I think it's great. And I love children. And so I got into that. I went to Bowling Green State University and I knew I wanted to be a first grade teacher. And so as I was doing that, I was able to run track in college. So I was kind of like FloJo, just not all the way. So I did accomplish that dream. And while I was in school, I realized as a first grade teacher, you have to teach reading. And I
Yeah.
only had like one or two classes of that. And so right
I
after,
taught reading too. I was a
oh,
junior high
really?
teacher, and
Oh,
I kind of got thrown into that. I
yeah.
didn't really have a
It's
background.
it takes a skill, and I think people think, oh, you teach people how to read, but there is something special, especially with first graders, fifth, 5 and 6 year olds. To teach someone to read is not as easy. And right now, I'm in it right now, teaching someone to drive, right? Like it's you remember how to drive, but you don't remember how you learned how to read, right?
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
there's difficulties that come with reading. There's dyslexia and dysgraphia and all those things. So anyway, I stayed my fifth year. I graduated in 4 years. And then I got my master's in reading, and I stayed at Bowling Green and got on with the Martha Weber Reading Center. And I had a minor in Spanish. And so, in order to finish that, I had to stay one more year in college to get my master's in reading. And so that was where I was going to be. And like you said, 20 years of my education and teaching career has been in Utah. I moved here after 3 years of teaching in North Carolina after meeting my husband. And as an educator, it was easier for me to move. He was in sales and marketing. And so I moved here and I became a second grade teacher, and then a literacy coach, which used both
Mm.
of my, degrees. But what propelled me into administration and to be a principal was the lack of representation at tables when it came to talking about our marginalized communities, our Black and Brown children. And I realized that there were decisions being made from non-voices at the table. And I had a problem with that. I thought, well, if you're going to make these decisions, let's talk to the community about it. And let's also support these students in ways so that they can see themselves in that. And so I think my motivation to give what I had to, be visible for students to see someone advocating for them is what propelled me into administration. So I went back and got my second master's at the University of Utah within the first 2 years of me living here in Utah, and
Oh.
went back with to get the educational leadership and policy. And
Did you
it
already
was,
have children at that time?
yes, at that time, and I had three older bonus children that were 5, 5, and 6. And then when I finished the degree, and this is the thing about being a woman, we just do things at the same time. I was pregnant, but I didn't know I was pregnant.
Oh.
I even played an April Fool's joke. It's bad. Don't ever do that. And I joked that I was pregnant, and I was. I didn't realize it. So it was great. I think it was the stress that I didn't pay attention to things. And so I got the second master's and applied to become a principal, assistant principal. And so that career path then, just propelled.
So right after, you were pretty early then. So you went straight back into, second grade teaching and then right over to,
Well, I had been a teacher for 7 years at that point.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So I
Okay.
had been a teacher for 7 years at that point. And then when I moved here, I had the 2 years and
Okay.
in Utah as a teacher and then literacy coach. And then became an administrator in a different school district than I was originally teaching. So I got to go through and see differences of school districts splitting. I was literacy coach during that time, and I was really, I had good influence of what a good principal looked like, and negative influence. And so I knew what kind of principal I wanted to be. But what led me here as director was just a series of events that I think in your career you just naturally progress. And they do say that you change your career up to 3 times in your lifetime.
Yeah.
And technically I have, I've just stayed in the same field. I think when you know what your mission and your vision is for yourself in the world, it doesn't matter what organization or what, school district you're with, as long as you're following that, you land in it. And I couldn't say no to that. Like, every time I felt the pull. And then I had great opportunities and experiences and mentors along the way. And I'm just, Sydnee Dickson, I have followed her. And so to become friends with her, she was one that I would watch and learn from, I think, helped me in my career to
I
get to this.
love this.
Yeah. But the biggest push, I think, when it has come to um, working with other members of the state and being on the Ethnic Studies Commission and as a governor appointee and those opportunities that if you would have told 22-year-old teacher me, I would have been like, absolutely not. I think is when I ran for community council, Bluffdale City Council in 2019.
Mm.
I ran for office, and um, it's interesting because when you ask me about women in careers and things like that, and I was deciding what to do, I would have never have run for a political office ever, which was really an interesting thing. And so um, I think, I call her my godmother. I grew up with my best friend's mom, and she was a principal, and she would always say, everyone give as much is given and much is required, and from the
Yep.
other,
Yep.
much is provided. And it's a Bible verse, Luke 12:48. But because she was in a public school setting, she never said the Bible verse, but I knew.
You know,
And she would say it many times, to much is given, much is required. And so I always hold on to that
well,
as
that's
I'm doing
interesting.
things. And so when I ran for office, I didn't win. I lost in the primary by like 6 votes. So
I,
please register to vote, please.
I remember that. I remember it was so close.
6 votes. And so, but I think that helped me navigate what I have to navigate now in my career and position. So it was definitely not planned out this way, but
But you move and
yeah,
and women do that more than men. We know
yes,
for women's careers, especially
yes.
when you have home and family, but we know about 30 to 40% more women more than men. We're driven more by purpose and vision that just connects so deeply. And I
Yeah.
have a few brothers out of my six that are kind of like that, but men are not. I don't know. Women just do this more. We want to make a difference in unique ways and often through our careers.
It moves you.
But you have really shown. And Sid, are you at your desk? Are you ready to jump in? There you
I
are.
am here.
Good, perfect timing. We start talking. I'm like, we're ready to jump over to Sid. But Michelle, just to finish the thought, I love how you've integrated this purpose, this feeling like this is what you're meant to do, this influence around you, and the navigation is interesting for women. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so pleased now to have Dr. Sydnee Dickson. She has been serving the children of Utah as a proud educator for the past 44 years. She joined the Utah State Office of Education in 2007 and was named the State Superintendent of Public Instruction in 2016. Sid, I did not realize it had been almost 10 years, 9 years. That is gone. I remember when that's gone quickly for me, maybe not for you.
That depends on the day.
Probably. And so prior to joining that office, she served in Utah public schools in roles including teaching, school counseling, school and district administration. And so Superintendent Dickson began her own education in a two-room schoolhouse in rural Utah. I'm not sure I knew that. And she was a first-generation college graduate and went on to earn two master's degrees in school counseling and school administration, as well as a doctorate in educational leadership and policy at the University of Utah. And so her background, of course, fuels her passion to ensure that all students have opportunities to succeed. She also serves on national boards, including the West Ed and Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, as well as serving on many state committees and councils. And she's a sought after thought partner. And I know that as well because we work together on national initiatives, including digital teaching and learning and other things as well. So welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining.
My pleasure. Hello, everybody out in virtual world. I wish that we were all in a room together so I could see your faces.
Yeah, me as well. So I'm going to give you that first question as well. Just talk us through some of your career path, your background, and I mean, and also integrate why you chose a career in K through 12 public education.
Sure, of course. I'll go back to my rural roots. So I was in a two-room schoolhouse, little tiny community with about 100 people. And my grandmother was my teacher in lower grades. Excuse me. And sorry, she taught me how to read, and I became a reader that just waited for that bookmobile. If any of you, if you're old enough, you might, or rural oriented, you might know what a bookmobile is. But I would wait for that library on wheels uh, every other week. I think it came maybe every other week or once a month, come rolling up to get my hands on Nancy Drew. So I was a young detective, and I loved school. I loved reading, but my grandmother was magical. She could turn anything into a teaching moment. And many years later, initiatives that I've been involved in, that I've seen in the research that I've read, are things that she used to do way back then. So she was really ahead of her time. And we have a lot of research to back up the methods that she used. So along the way, I had brothers and sisters who went to college, but they didn't finish. My mother and my father were very smart and hardworking. We were a blue collar family, working class family, and I always had a roof over head and food on the table, and we had a home of joy and love. So I just thought that that was plenty for me, and I really hadn't thought about college. I didn't have a lot of teachers that encouraged me in that way, but I did have mentors who would tell me that I was smarter than I was letting on, that I could do better. So I had those kind of teachers, right, that really impacted me. Is this your best work? I know you can do better, or speak up, or they would listen to my ideas. So I had this acumen as a young kid to try and be a problem solver. I was not someone who would stand by and just watch things happen or listen to people complain. So from a very young age, I liked to solve problems, and that was modeled for me by family members and community members and others. And when you grow up in a very small town, you help each other, you lean in, you solve problems together. So part of that, I think, was from my upbringing. So I did get into college, and I saved money, and I made sure that I found ways to connect with adults in the system. So I went to college. When I went to college, I immediately went to somebody in the dean of students, or I don't remember the name of the office, and just ask what I could do to help continue to support myself, because I wanted to finish school. So he got me involved in leadership. He told me how to get scholarships at the university. So I did have advocates but I sought them out in order to finish college. I thought I wanted to go into psychology and then maybe go to law school, helping the underserved. Really, I was always looking out for those I just felt like they weren't being treated fairly. And I thought law would be the answer to that. But I went to Utah State and I took an intro to teaching class. It sounded interesting. And I was placed in a school right away. It wasn't just theoretical or learning from a book. We had an opportunity to go right into the schools, and I was hooked. And I knew that was my calling. So as a junior in college, I shifted from my plan and became an educator. And I won't bore you with all the details of my education journey, because there's quite a chasm from how did I go from teaching to being a state superintendent? And it's a very long story, but I will shorten it by just saying I had people who tapped me for a variety of positions. Female principals. When I was a teacher in Jordan District, there were two female principals, one high school and one elementary. And then it started to build. And I happened to work for one of those women. And so watching her and watching her as our model, I remember, this just shows you the bias in thinking about what a female principal would look like. And when I got the call to say, will you come and interview? I'm embarrassed to confess this to people that I don't know on this call, but I just expected a buttoned up woman with, kind of cat glasses and a bun on her head and kind of a cartoon character. And I walked in, and here was this beautiful, classy, bright smile, embraced me, very warm woman. And, she was just so full of love and light, and didn't have the stern image that I had imagined. And so I had people who just made me want to be a leader as well.
Mm.
And along the way, again, problem solving, when I came to the state office to help solve a problem that we were having with just lack of resources for teachers, somebody along the way, years later, said, I will be a superintendent if Sid Dickson can be my deputy.
Oh,
And
wow.
I said, what? And this person said, I've watched her. She's a problem solver. She's a collaborator. She listens to all voices. She's willing to get things done, and I want her at my side. And from there, I ended up in this position. So those are some touchstones along the way, but I had both female and male advocates for females along the way. I am the third female superintendent in Utah. The very first superintendent in Utah was a woman, but the Senate would not confirm her because she was a woman at the time. Women couldn't vote, right? So like it was just very odd that the first superintendent was a woman who couldn't vote. So the Senate thought, well, that's odd. We can't confirm her if she can't even vote. So they put a male in her place, but she started the first kindergarten and did a lot of great things for this state. So all these years later, I'm so honored to live in her shadow and to work in her shadow and to be with people like Michelle who inspire me every day.
Oh, thank you to both of you for that. I'm glad we had a little space to get that background. Um, and I wanted to. This is a book that I use, and I use it for workshops and sometimes some classes. And so I took a couple of things out of this that things that we've all heard about, and I wanted to dig in a little bit and to some of those. So again, we'll put this in the follow-up email as well and a link to that book. It's a great book. So the first question, and Sid, your comment led right into this. So and Michelle, some of what you said too. So oftentimes we as women are socialized to not accept isn't the word, not claim our achievements. And you actually did that, Sid. You said, I did this, but a lot of times we're socialized not to. We're reluctant. We say, oh, everyone else did the work, right? And because we're not supposed to seem selfish or something. But that really it does not serve us well. So Michelle, I'd love you to start and talk about if you or situations where you've seen others. So this reluctance to claim our achievements, why that's a problem, and some thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a societal topic, and I don't have all the research like you would have behind it, but I know for women it's kind of like if tout that, you're not being very humble, right? And
Yeah.
so you don't want to brag, and I remember one time I was stating something, and I was told that I overshare and I shouldn't share that with
Oh,
people. It's intimidating. And so I don't want to be intimidating, and that's not what I was intending to be. And so I think the reluctance to share and to claim the achievements is to, make sure that we don't make people feel bad. And so when Miss Sydnee said that she had teachers that pointed out that she wasn't as, being as smart as she really is, and she's downplaying it, we've seen that, right? And my kids even talk about what they, will downplay. They don't want to seem as smart to other people because it's seen as a bad thing. And so I think we don't want to, make people feel bad or do different things. And I'm grateful that now we're in this energy and society of where we want to celebrate those achievements. And I think I've been able to surround myself with women who celebrate those achievements with me. And so it's kind of one of those, if you don't tell me what's happening, I'm going to be mad at you. My mom gets so mad at me when I'm like, oh yeah, tomorrow I have an award. And she's like, why didn't you say anything? And it's like, I feel like I'm doing this because I need to, but there's so many other people that should be. So I don't want to be so arrogant and so, robust. But then my mom's like, no. And then she'll get on social media and she'll share with the family, and she, bullies me up in a way that it reminds me that we've worked hard to get here. And so when people see those awards, they don't see what went on behind the scenes and the tears that were happening, or the failures that came along our way, or conversations that were missed, and just the hard work and the nights that we were,
Yeah.
pondering over things. And so, yeah, I think that's, just, we don't want to be braggadocious.
You know, what's interesting, I was thinking about some research that came out a couple years ago about women running for office and how men can run for office and they have to tout themselves all the time. And it doesn't stress them at all to do that. And the people the people think, oh, okay, that's just a man talking about himself. But the research came back that women, when they are running for office and have to talk about how good they are, right? It stresses them. It actually causes their body stress, and men don't have that. And one of the solutions they came up with is when women tout the successes of other women, it doesn't break any of those norms. Isn't that interesting? Sid, any thoughts about that? I do think that's a problem that we still see today.
I think it's fascinating. I think it was my second or third year as a superintendent, and I've always used the language of we. And the other phrase I use instead of but, I always say yes and, or, I am a very positive person. I'll just say that. So I have a I have a skill, or maybe it's my superpower, of surrounding myself with awesome people.
Oh,
And that's how we accomplish things together. So I use the vernacular of we. I think it's very natural. And I had somebody say to me, I never hear you use the word I. And there are specific things that you have done that you still won't say I. You use the term we. It's still hard for me today because I feel like there's rarely anything I do without support, influence, collaboration. But I thought that came from a man. It was very interesting. I
oh,
also had somebody say to me when I named my deputies, I happen to have two female deputies and a man, so three deputies, and two of the three were women. And I had a number of people, but specifically women, say to me, don't you feel like you need to balance that out with more men? And nobody would say that to a man
I
if they
know.
just had, if it was the reverse. And boy, that struck me the first time I heard that. But it wasn't just, I'm sure it was said more behind the scenes. I didn't hear it. So I appreciated hearing it up front. And we work in a setting in education full of women. When you look around and you see who's running the systems, quite often they're men. And so why are we not reflective of not only women who tend to be teachers, but also reflect the students that we serve? So we have a lot of white women teaching in our schools of students of color. And then you go up the food chain and you see a lot of white men, at least in our state, running the schools. And so, just reflecting on that, we rise together. And so being a champion of women and men who are great, we should champion each other and not stick ourselves in a box. But for sure, I've noted how men and women speak differently. I get to go to events all the time, and I loved whoever put that in the chat. I think it was Elizabeth that said, I got to attend this event and I'm so lucky. And she said, luck has nothing to do with it, my dear. I so love that. I think that's very typical. I feel blessed and lucky, and yet I see men show up at these same lovely events and they feel like they have a right to be there.
Yeah, I
So
love that. The growth mindset comes to mind with something you talked about, and this whole topic of claiming. So when someone gets, an award or some kudos, if we're feeling, oh, we don't like that, that actually is a sign we're over in the fixed mindset, right? If we're in the growth mindset, we're happy for people around. Michelle, were you gonna say something or
I
no?
was just in agreement. I'm like, yeah, that growth mindset is really important. And in that we term, because there are times when I have the idea, but it wouldn't be implemented without my team. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I think that helps as far as and there was the question of, as being a part of the team, it's definitely that, like, they know you're the leader. You don't have to remind them. It's there and it's evident. But as a leader, you are a part of that team as well. And so even as a principal, there were times where I would be sweeping things up and wiping down tables after lunch. And so
Actually, too often, probably.
and so it's important. And so then the team starts to see you as part of a team, of the team. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to shift us to, and you've both worked with so many women and men through your different, you know, meanderings in your careers. Um, but we do talk about, and people are talking about this a lot, that perfectionism. And it's been termed in some ways toxic perfectionism for some. But the research tells us that women tend to be more perfectionistic than men.
Mm.
I would love to have each of you comment. Maybe Sid, I'll start with you this one since I started with Michelle with that last question. Have you seen that it can really actually hurt your career and stop your growth when you're too perfectionistic? Have you seen that? Have you counseled people? Someone counseled you? Tell me what you're thinking.
Well, I let go of perfectionism a long time ago. So I personally lean into my many failings and I don't even try to be perfect. And I credit my mother for this. When I was younger, especially in teenage angst years, when you're hormonally impaired and everything seems unfair. And I would say to her, "Oh, this isn't fair, or this happened to me." And she would say, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And
Oh,
she would just always put it back to my attitude. I can't control people, but I can control how I feel about it. So I have not really been a people pleaser or worried about perfectionism, but I have had employees, many employees, especially females, who live in that space. And the counsel I give them is just what my mother did. You control what you can control and don't worry about the rest of it. And what is good enough? Who are we trying to please? In our education system, our primary customer is students. We don't have to be perfect for them, but we have to be present and show up. And we have to make sure that we're caring for each individual student while caring for the system. So when you are very mission driven and mission focused, it can help take away that perfectionism. It goes back to what Michelle said early on in her remarks, and that is really showing up with a purpose. And when you have that purpose, it's the thread that drives you, and you can let go of that people pleasing perfectionism piece if you're focused on the other, meaning the part of your job, the mission driven. You're not worrying about you, but you're worrying about the people that you serve.
I love that. I love that your mother said that to you because a lot of times we don't think that's a parenting tip right there, right? Because and that is more of a growth mindset parenting tip. So those listening in, if you haven't read the actual book Mindset by Carol Dweck, that gives you so much more than the surface like language. So Michelle, any thoughts?
Yes. This one, when you put it in the notes for us to look at prior to talking about it, I sat with this because perfectionism looks different, I think, in so many different instances. And thankfully now in this middle age, and I kind of laughed when Sydnee said that you were a hormonal teenager mess. And I now feel like in perimenopause, that's happening to me.
Oh,
So I'm like, oh, maybe I need my mom again. So, all jokes aside, I think as a Black woman, there is the pressure of perfectionism placed upon
mm,
our community. And
mm,
it hit me really hard twice seeing it played out like in Hollywood. I love Scandal, all the Olivia Pope fans that are out there. And it was funny because the correlation of this woman that plays her, Kerry Washington, it looped back around again in the movie she was in for 6888 on Netflix. And it's that topic of perfectionism. In Scandal, her dad was in one of the episodes and he said it, and it stuck with me all these years later, almost 10 years later, where he said, you have to be twice as good as them to get half of what they have. And I think that pressure for Black women, when you look statistically, Black women have the most degrees
yeah.
nationwide. And sometimes maybe the most debt because of it. But we, as a collective, really ride on those degrees. so when people are like, oh, do you have your doctorate yet? Right? Like I have 2 masters that should equal that, but I still get the question, are you going to do that? And I've had to sit back and say, no, not right now. No, I have 23 years, 24 years in education, 2 master's degrees, a plethora of certificates and licensures. And no, I'm not going to fall into that perfection trap. But then in the movie of 6888, her character then says, you have the burden to be better. And it is true. It's placed there somewhere. And I don't know who did it and how it was done. If it was, and I, do know how it was placed there, but then how as a family we perpetuate that. And so for me, I've made a big choice as a mother, kind of like Sydnee, to not fall into perfectionism, to make sure that if I see characteristics of my daughters, my daughter got a bad report from her dance teacher, and instead of a 3 or 4, she got a 2, and she was just in tears. And I'm like, that just means you have things to work on, and that's okay, because failure shows growth. And I get it. It's hard. It's hard to not be in a space where you made someone proud of you, but that doesn't mean she doesn't like you, because read the next note. She said that you're pleasant to be around. So it's not like you're horrible. You just need to work on your turnout. And I think, but within that, it's still in the back of my head. And so when I do a presentation or a conference, I have to remind myself, okay, it's 5 o'clock. Let's turn it in. There's always going to be work at the end of the day. Like, you don't have to do all this. It's going to be fine. You have order. It's
But that
organized.
pressure is there. And I just had an aha while you were talking, because I read so much about this perfectionism and how really, especially in male dominated fields, but other fields, women feel, and they do, I mean, it's reality, have to work harder than a lot of men. But then you have race and gender on top of
On
each
top
other.
of it.
And
Yeah.
it is double, and that really is part of the reason that women have more perfectionism, right?
Yeah.
I want you, Michelle, just interestingly, I just started watching that movie last night. Someone had recommended it,
Ah,
and we'll put it in the link. And I'm about halfway through, and I didn't know who that actor was.
Kerry Washington. Yeah. Oh, the younger one, the main character, she's new to the screen, but the sergeant is Kerry Washington.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And
Six
I'll
triple
tell you,
A.
it's awesome right now. I mean, I'm just an hour in, but I would recommend it because it really does have so much about sexism and about racism, but also about many of the struggles, honestly, I hate to say this, that we still see sometimes today, right?
Yeah. And
Um,
there's a question here based off of it. It says, can you address what non-Black women can learn from your community in more prevalent
oh, I
life
love that.
sorority, personal, professional networks? And if I'm reading this question correctly, I think just as women in general, Black, non-Black, Latina, Native, we really have to support each other. I feel sometimes I get shocked sometimes, in education it happens. You see it in other business careers, but specifically in education. For me, and Sydnee can talk to this too. I'm always surprised when it's women that are the ones not promoting or helping other women. Like it's like the zero sum mentality that if I
That
don't,
happens.
then I won't have enough room. And I'm like, literally, the schools are filled with women teaching right now. And so I feel like as women, Black, non-Black, we really have to just be around each other and talk to each other and support each other. And, the more you interact with other women, the easier it is. We're all going through hard things. And so in our workplace, the best place to support each other and to create this sorority is to be together and not be competitive.
I have to tell you that I was just having a conversation with two people yesterday that are being women who told me they're being significantly bullied by another woman in a high position. And for the most part, though, I have women who support other women, right? That's more. I mean, Sid, you talked about doing that you pull, you give opportunities to good men and women. but even just a few women that don't support other women can do some damage, right?
Yeah.
And so can I just say I get teary-eyed when I think about this. That's unacceptable to me. That is unacceptable that we don't support each other as women.
And it
Uh,
can be the small things. I'm surprised how often I will have an employee or, gosh, just somebody who has observed me somewhere say, you stopped and talked to me and gave me some tips, or you encouraged me, or it's something super
oh,
small. You acknowledged me in a crowd, and it meant all the world to me 10 years later. I've never forgotten that. So I think sometimes it doesn't have to be, I'm going to write you a letter of recommendation, or I'm going to hire you and put you in this position. It can be something as small as just encouragement
and we
and
need to remember that as
right.
peers, as even up. I used to do a lot of that up to even my university presidents. Just tell them what they did well sometimes. Do you know that when you spoke and you did this particular thing, um, people just kind of look at me funny, um, but it makes a difference. Those small things make a difference. So I love that. Thank you. Um, do you see any other questions you want to jump on?
See.
If you don't, I'll add another one, but I haven't been following them as much as I
There
have.
is one in the question. It says for anyone, what is one failure in your life or career that sticks out to you as a pathway to your success?
Ooh, I love that
Oh
question.
my gosh.
Who wants to go
Just one
first?
failure, just one. Okay, that's good. What is one failure in your life or career that sticks out to you as a pathway to your success? Oh,
I'll share one when this is years ago, but I learned from it. As a teacher, I guess I didn't understand that there are layers of bureaucracy and
Mhm.
layers of chains of command. And so I saw something that I thought was an injustice. I talked to a principal who was male at the time that was part of the injustice, and it fell on deaf ears. And without maybe talking to peers who are a little bit more experienced, I think I was a second or third year teacher. I jumped I jumped rank and went to the district and talked to like the highest of the high. And instead of solving the problem, I ended up getting moved to another school. Now, part of that was my choice, right? But I should have I should have tried to build some bridges and work within the system. And I learned very young that at a very young age that you have to try and navigate systems in more collaborative ways. Now, if there's an injustice, you don't stand back and ignore it or take your time or drag your feet. That's not what I'm implementing or what I'm indicating. What should have happened, however, is I should have had a broader understanding of how the system works. So now when I'm working with the legislature or I'm working within a parent group or whatever it is, I try to get some basic understanding of how that system works so that I then can build relationships within that system. And relationships have been the foundation to any success that I personally have had or we collectively in our agency have had. It's always about relationships.
Oh,
oh goodness.
that's such a great comment. Yeah, I love
It's
that. Michelle, you want to go? Do you want to
yeah.
talk about your
Oh,
failure?
that is the true relationships, 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 echo, echo, which goes back to the one failure that I mentally come back to and loop a lot of times, is when it was my first year of teaching in first grade. And in North Carolina, where I was teaching, there were a lot of Hmong students and families that lived. And so early on, I was able to work with immigrant families and refugee families, which has really helped me into this part of my career. And early on, I learned to not touch a student in this way. We were doing pumpkin carving, right? We were talking about pumpkin carving and teaching them all the things that happen with pumpkin carvings and all the guts that were sticking out. And the kids were all around me at the small table. And my students were looking at it. And I was like, do you want to touch it? Do you want to touch it? And so they were picking up the guck and the seeds and everything. And one of my other students, and I always think back to her, Weena, she was standing back and she didn't want to touch it. And she's, a quieter student, one of my Hmong students. And I'm like, come touch it, Weena, come touch it. And I grabbed her hand and I put her hand in the
Oh.
guk. And I can still see her reaction of screaming and crying. I don't know what trauma I would have uncovered. And I didn't know that at that time, right? I just did not know. And so that was definitely, she cried. And luckily, she went to the corner and my assistant kind of went over to her and I said, "Are you mad at me?" And she kind of shook her head. And thankfully from there, I left it alone. But it definitely was a failure on my part as a teacher of not creating a safe space for this student. And so I'm very cognizant now, every time I work with teachers, every time I work with immigrants, of just very cognizant of what they might have gone through that they're not telling us prior to coming here. And I don't know if that was my pathway to success, but it definitely has helped me understand, how to work with our families that are from different countries.
And I think that's really a skill too for being in the workplace in your career to not just assume. A lot of people have gone through trauma. I mean, Sid and I don't know if you were there, we went to this a while back, well, a couple of months ago, we went to this mental health for children conference that were really focused on 0 through 5. And it was amazing that little things, just even as babies, will stay with your bodies forever. And so, with our peers in the workplace, with different, just being aware that we should not be judging, right? Because we don't know their background, and being a little, I don't,
It's
grace,
the
use
empathy. I
grace.
think it's the empathy that has stayed with me the whole time. And so I have that empathy for all people. Now, mind you, it doesn't come across if someone's not showing up to work. And,
Yeah.
I have empathy for your situation. However, so as a leader, I have to navigate being over empathetic. But it definitely set me up to be more empathetic with people because, as Sydnee said, relationships are everything in order to be successful.
I love that. And Sid, a quick experience came to mind, just very quick on my end, that was kind of similar to yours. I didn't jump too many things, but just I jumped one and started complaining. And I had a good friend, she was the associate dean at the time. This was years and years ago. She just came up to me and said, "Don't do that, Susan. Don't do it." I said, "What?" She was like, "You're better than that. Don't do it." That's all she said. And you know what? I didn't do that ever again. Well, maybe maybe I strategically. You have to pick and choose, right? Sid?
Susan, Kendall wrote something in the chat that I thought was so important. How do you approach woman to woman in leadership that's constantly multitasking and trickles down the rest of the team? It impacts team morale. I relate to that, Kendall, so much, both from the multitasker and the recipient of somebody who's not paying attention because they're multitasking. I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier around perfectionism. Sometimes, and I see this especially with women, in a leadership position, we feel like we have to do everything and be on top of everything all at once. And instead of focusing on the being, we're focusing on the doing. And I read a book years and years ago that talked about just being present. And sometimes that's the more important thing, and more will get done when there are 20 things that need to be done on your to-do list. And so I have had to personally focus with the volume of things that I have coming at me. Sometimes I just have to stop and be present. And I've had feedback about that. So we've talked about it very openly as a team of turning off all your notifications. This is one of the things early on that we talked about. How can we be more productive so that we have work-life balance? We have to talk about all of those things that can affect how we're perceived, how it impacts our relationships. And I took on a personal coach with technology through a company called Productive Power. And it taught me how to manage my emails and a number of things, just all the Microsoft tools that are available to us. And now we have AI. So we have a lot of tools that can help us
Or
cut down on the
distracted.
things that
Yeah.
keep us multitasking.
Yeah.
So it's just as simple as turning off notifications, honestly, and being present in a meeting. And I think you can just have that conversation, and goes back to the old adage of I feel when you, because, fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel like we're not being heard when you're on your phone, when we're in a meeting and having a discussion.
Yeah.
I would just do it very openly.
You know,
That's how I've approached it, and it's worked. And then you don't just complain about it, but what are some norms that we could put in place so that that doesn't happen in the future?
I read a piece
Yeah.
a couple years ago, honestly, that said, because I was teaching unconscious bias training, and it was about microaggressions in some ways, but it talked really about um, the people that you multitask more around are people that you think less of in some ways,
Oh,
that you
really?
don't give them. Anyway, it was an interesting, I don't remember all the details, but it's made me think twice, and not that I'm the best at that or anything. But Michelle, any comments? I'm looking at the time,
I
so
know
we're
it's gone.
wrapping it up pretty soon, but
Yeah, I think that's a good one because I think honestly, it's one that I've had to work on myself, and I think Sydney hit the nail on the head. We're trying to do so much in this high level position, and thankfully, it does go back again to relationships. And if this is someone in leadership, I've had my team members come to me and and say we need more time with you. And when you're in meetings, you're on your computer. We're all on our computer, but they can tell the difference between being
you
present at the meeting.
you can see eyes.
Exactly. And then just reading or they'll ask a question. And then because I've been reading an email, I didn't hear the question. And
Okay.
so because I've been with my team now here in this position for 5 years, they did come to me and say, we need you, and I was like, oh my goodness, yeah, you have this open door policy, but I have to be intentional of putting the phone down. Even like in this meeting, I turned my phone on airplane mode so I wasn't tempted to try to go into it or anything like that. And so I think if this woman is in leadership with you and you have that relationship, you can just kind of close the door to the office and say, hey, like, like it was offered, but it's been it's been put to me, and I valued that from my team. I was grateful that they called me out on it. It wasn't affecting the morale, but it definitely was affecting how they felt heard. And they are important to me. So I wanted to make sure that they knew that.
And
Um,
there's some good models of how to help your team get used to giving and receiving feedback in positive ways and all of that too. As we're wrapping up, we've just got like 3 minutes and I need 1 minute at the end. So each of you have 1 minute. Thinking back to the title, Critical Components That Propel Women's Careers. Just any final thoughts? Sid, why don't you start? Final thoughts.
Use your voice. I think I've ended up in places, whether it's on a committee, a national board, the position I'm in now, it's using your voice. This is something I have to coach my female executives on. When we're in private conversations, they have amazing ideas. Small group, I hear amazing ideas, but less apt to speak up, especially when in the presence of male leaders. So find and use your voice.
And before I go to Michelle, what is I'm throwing this at you at the last minute. One book you'd recommend for people to read. We can come
Oh,
back if we can come back if you don't have it.
yeah, I can think, I have a lot of them, but one that comes to mind that inspires me is Abraham Lincoln's Lessons on Leadership.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll put that in the follow-up email that everyone will get. Michelle, one book and then final thoughts.
One book. Okay, so the book that I'm reading is Education is for Everyone. I'm just recently picking it up right now, so I'm in the middle of it. That's just on the top of my head. I think it talks about the history of education, especially public education, how it was created and why. And it's a reminder that our nation was built on free education, and our founding fathers wanted it for everyone, and how it's shifted and changed. So that's definitely a
Thank
really
you.
good book. And then your second question was?
Just a final thought today about
Final thought.
women's careers and propelling them forward.
Yeah. I think for me, it's a matter of asking for help. I think when you're going into leadership and things that are going to propel you forward, we don't know it all. You can't do it all. And I think delegating and asking for help is one way that it gets you into places that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. So definitely ask for help.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And Sid, thank you so much for joining today. And I also want to thank our sponsors at one more time, the John M. Huntsman School of Business and USU Extension, for making this event possible. And we have two more in the series next week. One on Monday, The Unspoken Truths for Women's Career Success. Tessa White has a fairly new book, and she'll be talking with me about her book. And then next Wednesday, the impact of sexism on women's careers. And Lisa Watts Baskin and Holly Richardson will be joining me for that. So again, thank you to our speakers and thanks to all of you for listening, and have just a wonderful day.